One candidate who will not be on the debate stage in Iowa tomorrow is Michael Bloomberg. The former New York City mayor says his campaign is skipping the early voting contests. He's instead pouring resources into Super Tuesday and battleground states. In an op-ed for CNN Today, Bloomberg argues Democrats need to follow his lead. He says focusing on Iowa and New Hampshire actually hurts the party and helps President Trump, adding that Democrats' system of electing a nominee is, quote, undemocratic. Let's bring in Bloomberg campaign manager Kevin Sheekey. Kevin, thanks very much for joining us.
Elaine, thanks for having me.
So Iowa and New Hampshire have long been critical states for the Democratic primary. Why does Bloomberg feel focusing efforts there actually will hurt the party?
Well, of course they have. I mean, I think the chairman in both of those states are happy to tell you that since 1976, no one has gone on to become president without winning one or both those states. But we're in an existential crisis here now. Democratic Party and the candidates, really because of the party rules, have spent the last year raising every dime they can around the country, hiring every staffer they can, opening every office they can in the state of Iowa, knocking on the doors of every door they can for Democratic caucus goers in the good state of Iowa. But Democrat and Republican pollsters will tell you the same thing. Donald Trump's going to win Iowa. And so we've spent a year investing every dollar that we can in a state that ultimately we're going to lose in November to the great disadvantage of the party. The states that are competitive in November, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona, we're not in, at least not until today, which is where Mike Bloomberg is, both leading a campaign that he's running to hopefully to be the nominee for the party, and a commitment that he's made to stay in those states, whether he's the nominee or not, to make sure that we have a fighting chance in November.
Well, candidates who do not have unlimited resources often could use a win in these early voting states to gain momentum. Does Michael Bloomberg's ability to skip places like Iowa and New Hampshire apply, mainly because he's funding his own campaign?
Well, listen, I think it certainly helps. It's really tough. I would argue we're running a national primary campaign that no one's done that since John F. Kennedy in 1960. And yeah, it helps to have resources, celebrity, or both. And certainly Mike Bloomberg has a record to go along with those two things. I think what Mike had said in the op-ed that he posted today, though, was that if he was president of the United States and that the de facto leader of the Democratic Party, he would switch the rules going forward to actually give the Democratic Party a better chance to win elections in the future. If you think about what the schedule should look like this time, if in fact we as a party wanted to do better, Wisconsin would be the first state, Michigan would be the second. You could have Pennsylvania as the third and North Carolina as the fourth. And if you did, we would be knocking on doors for the last year in the states of Wisconsin and Michigan. Right now, Donald Trump is running unopposed in those states. He's doing rallies practically every week in those states. He has gotten stronger, not weaker, in the state of Wisconsin, a state that he won by a mere 23,000 votes last time. And what Mike's saying is we have to look at these rules if we don't want to run the risk of losing these elections. Right now, Donald Trump is winning a national election because he's ahead in Wisconsin. He's even in Michigan. He's probably ahead in Arizona, and he's probably ahead in Florida. And that's just a real problem for the party.
Well, does this mean the campaign is paying no attention to the outcomes of the early voting state contests?
Well, Mike's not on the ballot in the first four primary states. The first four primary states represent about 3.9% of the available delegates. Mike got into this campaign very late. He figured he just couldn't sit on the sidelines anymore, that he had to get in and do something, that Donald Trump was an existential threat and he was not willing to stand by. And so it was going to be difficult to get into states that other people had been campaigning in for a year. But he's taking his message to the next 16. That represents about 38.9% of the available delegates. That campaign is resonating. Right now, we have a full-fledged campaign in the state of North Carolina. There are 110 delegates in the state of North Carolina compared to about 24 in New Hampshire. And people are excited to get involved. They're excited that someone's come to town and organized that state because they know what it means, not just for the national election in November, but what it means for state and local races down the line.
So another self-funded candidate in this race, Tom Steyer, is focusing on early voting states, and there may be evidence that it could be paying off. Recent polls show him surging in South Carolina and Nevada. Looking at that, does the Bloomberg campaign see perhaps some missed opportunities there, not spending money and resources in those early states?
No, I don't think we're second guessing. Listen, I think, the point of Mike's op-ed today was that we really have to think about structural reform. We really have to think about changing the rules so the party is better positioned to win national elections. And we have to think about states that are, quite frankly, more representative of the population. in this country, a point that he made in his op-ed. But listen, I'll leave the decisions of the other campaigns to those campaigns.
Well, does Bloomberg need a top 3 finish in at least Texas or California to stay in the race past Super Tuesday?
Yeah, I think he does, and I think he will. Listen, the Democratic Party sets down a simple rule that you have to get above 15% of the delegates in any state that you want to win, and we fully expect that this campaign will get above that threshold in every state that we campaign in.
Is there a maximum amount of money Michael Bloomberg is willing to spend?
Mike has said he'll spend whatever it takes to remove Donald Trump from office, whether he's the nominee or not.
Your campaign picked up its first congressional endorsement today. New York Democrat Max Rose represents a district that has seen a lot of support for President Trump. But does the campaign have any plans to court more progressive backers?
Yeah, no question. And I think the campaign does have progressive backers. Listen, the 3 co-chairs of this campaign are Steve Benjamin, who's an African-American mayor from Columbia, South Carolina, the great Greg Fisher from down in Louisville, Kentucky, and Mayor Tubbs out in Stockton. Those are 3 great progressive mayors who have really been enacting change in 3 terrific cities around the country. There's a slew of mayors behind them. The political chair for the campaign is Michael Nutter, former mayor of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And so the folks coming together all around this country, a lot of mayors who recognize the type of change that Mike Bloomberg led as mayor of New York and the type of help he gave them to lead the same kind of changes coming together as part of this campaign. And I think it's only just getting started.
Finally, a former Bloomberg LP employee reportedly asked a judge last week to invalidate any non-disclosure agreements used to help settle sex, age, and disability discrimination complaints against the company. How do you respond to criticism that these NDAs are being used to silence Bloomberg critics?
I don't think it's true. I mean, I'll leave it to the company to respond to those, those questions between whatever legal papers were filed. But I just simply think it's not true.
All right, Kevin Sheekey. Kevin, thank you very much for your time.
Hey, Lane, thanks for having me.